The clinking of silverware against fine china in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The Golden Cage was the city's pampered retreat for the ultra-rich. For billionaire Arthur Bance, it was just another Tuesday. He was a predator, dressed in a $1,000 suit, a man who devoured entire companies. But that night, the hunters became hunted. In 60 seconds, the retreat would transform into a symphony of screams. 5 armed and silent men would turn the restaurant into a prison. The police were minutes away. His private security was a lie. His life was worth less than the fine wine he was drinking. The only thing standing between him and a brutal end was not a hero nor a cop, but a waitress named Kate, a woman paid to be invisible, who was about to prove she was anything but that. The air inside the Golden Cage was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a carefully curated atmosphere, designed to make patrons feel that the chaotic streets of Tribeca were a world away, a raw rumor they might read but would never truly experience. Catherine Novak, or Kate, as she insisted, moved through this rarefied air like a ghost. Her uniform was an impeccable black ensemble, her movements economical and precise. To the diners, she was a functional part of the decor, a polite automaton who refilled water glasses and described the special vintage wines with practiced enthusiasm. They did not see how her eyes never truly settled, how they constantly scanned the room in a subconscious pattern of sweeping left to right, front to back. They did not notice how she mentally mapped the exits, the choke points, the lines of sight from each table. They did not understand that her quiet demeanor was not shyness, but a cultivated state of low-level vigilance, a phantom limb of a life she had tried to amputate. 6 years in a different uniform, in places where the air smelled of sand and cordite, had hardwired her nervous system for threat assessment. Now, the greatest threat usually involved a dropped fork or a complaint about a faulty bottle of Chateau Margaux. That night's main event was Table 7, the restaurant's most coveted corner booth. It was occupied by Arthur Bance. Bance was not merely rich, he was a force of nature, a corporate raider whose image often adorned the cover of Forbes with headlines that used words like disruptor, visionary, or in more critical publications, vulture. He possessed a jaw that seemed carved from granite and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and assessing. He treated the restaurant staff with a dismissive, peremptory courtesy that was somehow more insulting than overt rudeness. He was not there to enjoy the food. He was there to conduct a power play with a $500 stake. Across from him sat Gerard Peterson, a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, a man whose soft physique and nervous energy contrasted sharply with Bance's predatory stillness. "The board is ready to capitulate," Peterson said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "The last holdouts are yielding by Friday. Towel red is yours, Arthur." Bance did not smile. He simply nodded, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. "Holdouts don't yield, Gerard. They break. Ensure their severance packages are minimal. An example must be made." Kate approached the table to clear the appetizer plates, her presence barely registered. "Will you require anything further, Mr. Bance?" she asked, her voice calm and even. He waved a dismissive hand without looking at her. "Just the check, and have my car brought around. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Tell Frank I want to be in motion in 10 minutes. Frank Miller was Bance's head of security, a burly man currently sitting at the bar sipping a sparkling water and trying to appear inconspicuous, a task for which he was physically ill-suited. As Kate turned away, her gaze swept across the restaurant's large, floor-to-ceiling windows. For a fraction of a second, her professional calm wavered. A black utility van, a windowless Ford Transit, was parked directly across the street. It was not in a legal spot. It was double-parked, with its engine likely running. Delivery vans were common, but not at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and not this specific model. It looked more like a tactical vehicle than a florist's transport. Her eyes narrowed. A flicker of movement in the alley beside the restaurant caught her attention. A man in a dark hoodie, seemingly talking on his phone, but with his head tilted towards the restaurant entrance, his posture too rigid for a casual conversation. Her heart rate increased a single controlled beat. Coincidence, she told herself. This is New York. It's always chaos. She had been seeing ghosts for years. Every stopped car was a threat. Every loiterer, a potential gunman. It was a symptom of her past, a hypervigilance she tried to medicate with the mundane rhythm of service. She delivered the check to Table 7, her movements still fluid, not betraying the sudden tension coiling in her stomach. Bance was signing the exorbitant bill, his Mont Blanc pen tearing against the paper. "Sir," she said, her voice a little lower than before. "Your security, Mr. Miller, is no longer at the bar." Bance did not look up. "He probably went to check on the car. Frank is competent." Kate's eyes flicked to the bar. Miller's glass was still there, half full. A professional doesn't abandon his post without notifying his principal, not even for a moment. Her blood ran cold. The man in the alley had vanished. The van was still there. Something was fundamentally wrong. The Golden Cage's carefully constructed symphony was about to reach a discordant, violent crescendo. She turned towards the kitchen, quickening her pace. She needed to reach a landline to make a call that would not be tracked on the restaurant's public Wi-Fi. Her hand was almost on the kitchen door when the world dissolved into noise and terror. The restaurant's front glass window did not just shatter, it imploded. A deafening clang of synthesized noise, a high-frequency acoustic blast from a device placed outside, shredded the glass and sent a disorienting sound wave through the dining room. Customers screamed, ducking under tables, ears ringing before the last shard of glass had skittered across the marble floor. 5 figures moved through the empty frame. They wore black tactical gear, faces hidden by dark balaclavas. They moved with a chilling efficiency that spoke of extensive training. One held a high-power signal jammer, and in an instant, all mobile phones in the room were dead. 2 others deployed, brandishing suppressed handguns, their movements quiet and deliberate as they controlled the terrified crowd. "Nobody move," one of them barked, his voice a low, grave command. "Stay on the floor, hands where I can see them." The 2 remaining men, with absolute focus, ignored the panicked diners. Their eyes were fixed on a single target. Their destination was table 7. Kate flattened herself against the wall near the kitchen entrance, her mind a whirlwind of activity. This was not a robbery. Robbers are noisy, messy, and interested in wallets and jewelry. These men were silent, precise, and interested in one person. This was a kidnapping, a professional extraction. One of the men reached Arthur, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him from the booth. Peterson shrieked and cowered under the table. Bance, for the first time in what was probably decades, seemed utterly shocked. His mask of invincible power stripped bare. The group's leader, a tall man with an air of cold authority, leaned close to Bance's ear. "Arthur Bance," his voice a low hiss that cut through the hostages' groans. "The ghosts of Tal Red send their regards. You have a debt outstanding to pay." In that moment, Catherine Novak understood that the ghosts of her past and his had just converged in a storm of violence within the Golden Cage. And the waitress, the invisible woman paid to take orders, was about to start giving them. Chaos is a symphony of fear. For the Golden Cage's patrons, it was a cacophony of shrieks, gasps, and the frantic scuffing of expensive shoes on a floor strewn with broken glass. For Kate, the noise faded into a focused hum. Her brain, jolted by the familiar surge of adrenaline, filtered out the panic and processed only data. 5 hostiles, all male, judging by their build. Black tactical gear, non-reflective ballistic vests, primary weapons appeared to be 9mm suppressed pistols, likely Glock 19s or SIG P26s, efficient for close quarters work, an active signal jammer. No long guns were visible, meaning they planned for speed and discretion, not a prolonged siege. Their entry was professional, an acoustic charge for impact and surprise, followed by immediate control of the environment. Their formation was a classic diamond, 1 man forward, 2 on one flank security, and 1 in the rear who now secured the main entrance. The leader, the tall one who had spoken to Bance, was the primary target. Her mind cataloged everything in less than 2 seconds. They were dragging Arthur toward the broken window, their movements practiced and synchronized. The flankers kept customers immobilized with threatening gestures. Their silenced weapons made no sound, but projected an aura of lethal intent. A woman near the front began to sob hysterically, her cries piercing the tense silence. One of the men, let's call him Flanker 1, turned towards her. "Shut her up," he growled to his comrade. Kate saw her opportunity. It was small, a split second of diverted attention, but it was enough. While all eyes were on the hysterical woman and Arthur Bance's abduction, nobody was looking at the waitress who had melted into the shadows next to the kitchen door. Her first priority was not Arthur, it was the civilians, and the most immediate threat was escalation. Panic could get someone killed. She needed to disrupt their plan, to sow a seed of chaos they could not control. Her eyes scanned the immediate area. A heavy silver tray rested on a nearby service stand. Beside it, a bottle of San Pellegrino. It was not a gun, but it would have to do. She hugged the wall. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound. Flanker 2 was closer, his back partially turned as he observed the cowering diners on the other side of the room. He was about 15 feet away, too far for a direct physical confrontation, but his position was tactically weak. He had allowed a blind spot to his back, assuming the threat was contained in front of him. A rookie mistake, or perhaps just arrogance. Kate moved. It wasn't a run, but a silent, gliding motion, terrifyingly stealthy. She gripped the silver tray, its weight familiar and solid in her hand. In one fluid movement, she flung it like a disc. It sliced through the air, a silver blur, and struck flanker 2 on the side of the head, just behind the ear. The heavy silver rim connected with his temporal bone with a dull, sickening thud. The man grunted, his knees buckled as he staggered, his weapon pointing skyward for a disoriented moment. He did not fall, but he was stunned. The attack was so unexpected, so completely outside the parameters of their operation, that it momentarily broke their coordinated rhythm. The target leader, who was halfway to the window with Bance, turned his head, his eyes beneath the balaclava widened in surprise. What the hell? That was the distraction. In that instant of confusion, Kate lunged forward. She wasn't going for the dazed man. She was going for the one closest to the customers, flanker 1, who was now turning to see what had happened. She closed the distance in 3 long strides, gripping the neck of the Pellegrino bottle. Reaching him, she smashed it against the edge of a marble-topped table. The glass shattered with a sharp snap, leaving her holding the jagged neck. Flanker 1 barely had time to register her presence before she was upon him. She didn't stab him. That was messy and unpredictable. Instead, she drove the jagged glass into the soft tissue of his weapon-holding hand, directly into the muscle and tendons of his forearm. He roared in pain, an involuntary spasm causing his fingers to release the pistol. The weapon clattered to the floor. Before he could react, Kate delivered a sharp knee to his groin, followed by a brutal palm strike to his nose. There was a wet crunch. He reeled backward, clutching his face, blood gushing between his fingers, completely neutralized as a threat. 2 down. It had taken less than 5 seconds. The room, which had been filled with whimpers, fell into stunned silence. Customers and the remaining attackers stared at the waitress, this unassuming figure of quiet efficiency who had just dismantled 2 trained operatives with a serving tray and a water bottle. The target leader finally reacted. "Forget protocol. Get him out now," he yelled at the man holding Arthur. He raised his own weapon and fired 2 rounds in Kate's direction. The suppressed shots were soft hisses, but no less deadly. Kate was already moving, diving behind an overturned mahogany table. The bullets impacted the wood where her head had been moments before. "Shoot her!" the leader shouted at the stunned flanker 2, who was shaking his head, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. Meanwhile, Arthur was fighting back. Spurred on by Kate's impossible intervention, his survival instincts finally overrode his shock. He stomped hard on the instep of the man holding him. Then he launched a backward elbow into his captor's ribs. The man grunted. His grip loosened for a critical second. It was all Arthur could do, a desperate, clumsy act, but it bought another moment. From behind the table, Kate's mind raced. 3 hostiles remained, the leader, the rear guard at the door, and the stunned one, who was now raising his weapon. She was unarmed and outgunned. Staying put was a death sentence. She needed a new environment, a place with more cover, more choke points, more potential weapons. The kitchen. "Arthur!" she yelled, her voice cutting through the air with an authority that stunned him into obedience. "To me, now." The leader fired again, splintering more of the table. Kate peered over the edge. The rear guard at the door was advancing, trying to get a clear line of sight on her. The stunned one was still wobbly. The leader was split between dealing with her and securing his primary target. Their cohesion was broken. They were reacting to her, not executing their plan. She now controlled the tempo of the engagement. She kicked a heavy candelabra, sending it crashing to the floor in her path, creating another minor obstacle. "Arthur, move!" Arthur Bance, the billionaire titan who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors, crawled on his hands and knees towards the waitress, his bespoke suit tearing on the broken glass. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one in charge. He was following orders from a woman whose name he hadn't even bothered to learn. A woman who was now the only thing keeping him alive. The heavy swinging doors of the kitchen slammed shut behind them, plunging them into a world of stainless steel, hissing steam, and the lingering aroma of garlic and fear. The kitchen staff, a mix of chefs and dishwashers, was huddled in a corner, their white uniforms a stark contrast to the terror on their faces. "Stay down. Stay quiet," Kate ordered, her voice low and firm. Not for Arthur, but for the terrified staff. Her eyes were already moving, dissecting this new battleground. It was a maze of steel counters, walk-in freezers, and the open flames of gas ranges. It was noisy, messy, and dangerous. Perfect. Arthur leaned against a counter, breathing heavily, his face pale with a mix of shock and disbelief. What are you?" he stammered, looking at her as if for the first time. The woman he had dismissed as part of the furniture had just waged a small, brutal war on his behalf. Kate ignored him, Her mind wasn't in the Golden Cage's kitchen. For one heartbreaking moment, she was 6 years ago in a dusty, sun-baked alley in Beirut. The smell of cooking spices suddenly mingled with the phantom scent of diesel fumes and copper. She saw the face of the man she had been assigned to protect, a British diplomat named Alistair Finch. She saw the black sedan that came out of nowhere, the synchronized attack, the explosive charge that breached their armored vehicle. She remembered the failure, the cold, sick feeling of seeing her principal dragged away while she lay immobilized, injured, and helpless. They told her it wasn't her fault, that intelligence was bad, that the opposition was too prepared. But in the dark, silent hours of the night, failure was a cold companion. She had left the service, trading the Queen's shilling for minimum wage and tips, seeking anonymity, a silent penance. No, she thought, shaking off the memory with almost physical willpower. Not again. Not this time. This time, she wasn't immobilized. This time, she was in control. They said something about, she said curtly, her back to Arthur as she peered through the small circular window on the kitchen door. What is Tal-Red Industries? Arthur gasped, straightening his tie out of sheer ingrained habit. My fund is acquiring it. A hostile takeover. Who did you ruin to get it? Kate asked, her tone devoid of judgment. It was a simple tactical question. Arthur's jaw tightened. That's business. There are always casualties. What was the chief casualty's name? She pressed. The CEO, the founder, Walter Thorne, Arthur admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The company had been in his family for 3 generations. He couldn't adapt. He gambled everything against our offer. When it became clear he'd lose, he took his own life. Last month. Thorne. The name resonated with the attacker's words. The ghosts of Tal-Red send their regards. This was not a corporate kidnapping for ransom. This was revenge. Personal, intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. These men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to collect a debt Arthur couldn't pay with money. A heavy thud against the kitchen door made Arthur jump. They were coming. Kate moved with renewed urgency. We need to get out. There's a service exit in the back that leads to the alley. She scanned the kitchen again. Her eyes settled on a cast-iron skillet, heavy in a butcher block filled with knives. She snatched a 10-inch chef's knife, its weight comfortable and familiar in her hand. It felt more natural than the notepad she usually carried. Listen to me very carefully, she said, turning to face Arthur. Her eyes were chips of ice. The timid waitress had vanished, replaced by someone he couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares. From now on, you do exactly what I say when I say it. You ask no questions. You do not hesitate. Your life depends on your ability to follow a simple order. Understood? Arthur, a man who hadn't taken an order from anyone since he was a teenager, found himself nodding, dazed. Understood. The kitchen door burst open. The rear guard, the one from the entrance, stepped in cautiously, pistol in hand. Kate was ready. She had positioned herself behind a tall rolling rack filled with trays. As the attacker entered, she kicked the base of the rack. It rolled forward, a clattering metallic avalanche directly into the man's path. He was forced to scramble back, momentarily unbalanced. Kate exploded from her cover. She wasn't going for his weapon, she was going for his joints. She slammed the chef's knife handle into his wrist, a targeted strike designed to numb nerves. His weapon clattered to the floor. Before he could recover, she drove the point of her elbow into his solar plexus, forcing the air from his lungs in a choked gasp. As he doubled over, she brought her knee up under his chin with a brutal, sharp motion. His head snapped back and he collapsed unconscious before he hit the greasy floor. 3 down, 2 to go, but the leader was still out there, and he had the full history of the primary target. He was the most dangerous. From the dining room, the leader's voice resonated, amplified by the sudden silence. Silas Thorne. That was my father's name, Arthur. Does that ring a bell? He built that company with his bare hands. You took it all with the touch of a button and a smile on your face. So, the leader was Silas Thorne, Walter's son. This was his personal vendetta. You can't hide in there forever, Arthur, Silas yelled. And you, the waitress. Whoever you are, you're dead. You're only delaying the inevitable. Kate grabbed Arthur's arm, her grip like steel. He's right about one thing. We can't stay here. She dragged him towards the back of the kitchen. The alley is our only way out. But as they reached the heavy steel service door, they heard a metallic click from the other side. It was being locked from the outside. A cold voice filtered through the thick metal. It was the last man, the one who had been escorting Arthur. Silas, the exit is secured. They're trapped. They were locked in. The kitchen had become their tomb. Arthur looked at Kate, his face ashen. The cool confidence she had projected began to show the slightest cracks. The ghosts of Beirut were whispering in her ear again, taunting her with the claustrophobic dread of a crumbling plan, of a closing trapped. The word hung in the air heavier than the grease and steam. The kitchen that had felt like a tactical advantage moments earlier now felt like a cage. From the dining room, Silas Thorne controlled the board. From the alley, his last man held the only exit. Arthur's composure finally shattered. "We're dead," he breathed, sliding down the wall to sit on the greasy floor. "This is it. Oh God, Frank, where is Frank?" Kate's mind worked, discarding and forming plans at a rapid pace. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Your man Frank is either dead or compromised," she stated bluntly. "Given these men knew your exact location and schedule, my bet is on compromised." The idea hit Arthur like a physical blow. Frank Miller had been with him for over a decade. He was more than an employee. He was a constant, a rock of reliability. The betrayal seemed more inconceivable than the attack itself. "No, Frank," Arthur whispered. He wouldn't. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Bance," Kate said, her voice cutting, snapping him out of his denial. "Or a reason. Silas Thorne clearly has a reason. What's Frank's?" Before Arthur could respond, Silas's voice boomed from the dining room again, laced with triumphant cruelty. "I know you can hear me, Arthur. You must be wondering how we bypassed your security. You shouldn't have passed over Frank Miller for that promotion last year. Loyalty is a fragile thing, especially when it's underpaid." The confirmation was a gut punch. Arthur looked at Kate, his eyes wide with the raw pain of betrayal. Everything his life had been built on, control, power, bought and paid for loyalty, was a lie. He was utterly alone, except for her. He stared at this woman, this complete stranger, an enigma in the space of 10 minutes. She had shown more loyalty, more bravery than a man he'd paid a six-figure salary for a decade. "Why?" his voice cracked. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Kate finished checking the tension of a butcher knife she'd pulled from a magnetic strip on the wall. She tested its weight, its balance. "6 years ago, I was in Beirut," she said without looking at him. "I was part of a close protection team for a diplomat. We were ambushed. They were professionals like this group. They knew our route, our response time. They had inside help. My principal was taken. I was the only one left." She paused, the memory etching lines on her face. "I don't like to lose. Not twice." A tacit understanding passed between them. They were from different worlds, a billionaire and a waitress. But in that moment, they were bound by the shared experience of being hunted. A fragile, desperate alliance was forged in the crucible of the kitchen. "All right," Arthur said, pushing himself to his feet. His suit was ruined. His hands trembled, but a flicker of his old resolve had returned. "All right, what do we do? They expect us to stay here, to wait for the end, or to try the back door again. We're doing neither." Kate's eyes scanned the ceiling. She pointed with the butcher knife. The ventilation system. High on the wall was a large industrial-grade exhaust hood over the main grill with a wide duct leading up and through the wall. It was greasy, dark, and impossibly narrow. "You can't be serious," Arthur balked. "It's our only exit they won't be watching. It should lead to the roof," Kate reasoned. "From there, we have options. Fire escape, adjoining buildings, anything is better than a kill box." She dragged a heavy prep table under the duct. "You'll have to give me a boost. It's too high to reach." Arthur looked at the dark, greasy opening. The thought of crawling through that filth was repulsive, but the thought of Silas Thorne was worse. He nodded. "All right." Kate put the chef's knife handle between her teeth and tucked the butcher knife into the back of her waistband. "When I'm up, I'll pull you. Be ready to move fast." Arthur laced his hands and Kate stepped into them. With a grunt, he lifted her. She was surprisingly light, but dense with muscle. She grasped the edge of the duct. Her fingers found purchase on the greasy metal lip. She pulled herself up, swinging her legs into the dark, cavernous duct. A shower of dust and grime rained down on Arthur's head. "It's a tight squeeze," her voice echoed metallically from within. "But it goes up. I see a maintenance ladder, about 10 feet in." She reached a hand down. "Your turn." Arthur reached up, and Kate's grip closed on his forearm. It was like being gripped by a vice. She pulled, and with much scraping and cursing, Arthur Bance, the master of the universe, crawled inside the bowels of his favorite restaurant. The duct was suffocatingly narrow, the air thick with the smell of old grease. It was a humiliating and terrifying crawl, into darkness. Beneath them, they heard a crash as Silas and his remaining man finally burst into the kitchen. "They're gone!" Silas's voice was faint, enraged. "The duct! Check the roof! Go, go!" The race was on. Kate and Arthur scrambled up the maintenance ladder inside the duct, their movements clumsy and loud in the resonant metal tube. They were exposed, making a racket that was a perfect beacon for their hunters. Above, a faint square of lesser darkness promised an exit. Below, they could hear the sounds of pursuit. Their improbable alliance was about to face its ultimate test on the rain-slicked rooftops of New York. The plan to use the kitchen as a choke point was dead. The strategy had failed, but Kate Novak was trained to adapt, to turn a broken plan into a new opportunity. The kitchen was no longer a stronghold. It was a trap they had barely escaped. Now the entire building was the battlefield, and they had just traded a horizontal fight for a vertical one. Crawling through the ventilation duct was a claustrophobic nightmare. It was a tight fit for Kate. For the broader-shouldered Arthur, it was agonizing. The sharp edges of the metal tore at his expensive suit and scraped his skin. Every movement resonated as a deafening announcement of their position. He said, "Check the roof." Arthur gasped, his voice tight with panic. "They'll be waiting for us." "They have to find the roof access first," Kate's voice replied, calm and controlled. "We have a head start. Keep moving." They reached the top of the duct, which terminated in a large exhaust fan. A rickety service panel was built into the side of the duct just before the blades. Kate put her shoulder to it. It groaned in rusty protest. She braced herself and kicked. The panel sprang open with a screech of tortured metal, and they tumbled onto the gravel-covered rooftop under the cold night air. It had started to rain, a fine drizzle that slicked every surface and muffled the sounds of the city below. The rooftop was a labyrinth of HVAC units, pipes, and skylights. They were on a 5-story building, surrounded by taller skyscrapers that loomed like silent, indifferent gods. Almost immediately, a heavy metal door on the opposite side of the roof burst open. It was the stairwell to the roof access. Silas Thorne emerged, his pistol raised. He spotted them instantly. "There," he yelled. A shot rang out, not the muffled hiss from before, but a deafening crack that echoed between the buildings. He had removed the suppressor. He was done with subtlety. Kate shoved Arthur behind a large air conditioning unit. The bullet whizzed past, striking a metal chimney with a sharp ping. "He's alone," Kate observed, peering over the edge of their cover. "He must have sent his last man to cover the front or the alley." "Alone is all he needs to be," Arthur hissed, his back pressed against the humming metal. "He's overconfident," Kate said, her mind working. "He thinks he has us cornered. We'll use that." She looked around, her eyes sweeping their new environment. Her gaze landed on a thick bundle of electrical conduits running along the edge of the roof, connecting to a massive junction box. Beside it lay a discarded length of steel pipe, likely left by a maintenance worker. A desperate, dangerous idea began to form. "I need a distraction," she said, turning to Arthur. "A big one. Something that will draw his fire and get him to move from that doorway." Arthur looked at her, his face a mask of fear. "What am I supposed to do?" "Exactly what you do best," Kate replied, a grim smile touching her lips. "Be an arrogant billionaire. Draw his attention. Provoke him. He wanted to know about Walter Thorne. Ask his son what really happened. Keep him talking. Keep him angry. I need 30 seconds. Arthur looked at her in horror. "He'll shoot me." "He won't kill you from this distance. He wants to do this up close. I see it in his stance. This is personal for him. Now do it." Before he could protest further, Kate grabbed the steel pipe and slipped away, disappearing into the shadows and steam rising from the rooftop vents. Arthur was alone. He took a deep breath, the cold, damp air stinging his lungs. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. He thought about what she said. Be an arrogant billionaire. He knew how to do that. He stepped out from behind the HVAC unit, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Thorne!" he yelled, his voice surprisingly steady. "Silas. Thorne, is that you? You look exactly like your father. The same wild look in your eyes before he lost everything." Silas froze, his aim steadying on Arthur's chest. "Don't you dare utter his name, you parasite." "I'm just stating a fact," Arthur continued, taking a slow step forward. "He was weak. He couldn't compete. So he blamed the world. He blamed me, but it was his own failure that destroyed him. You're going to be a failure too." Rage contorted Silas's face. "He built a legacy. You destroy them. You are a plague." He took a step out of the doorway, moving onto the open roof to get a clearer shot. "I'm here to collect a debt he was too broken to demand." "A debt?" Arthur laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your father owed millions to his creditors. He left you nothing but his weakness, and you think you can succeed where he failed by cornering me on a rooftop with a handgun? It was working. Silas was moving, stalking towards Arthur, his focus entirely on him, his tactical awareness blinded by pure hatred. He was now midway across the roof. Meanwhile, Kate moved like a ghost. She circled around behind a series of large vents, the steel pipe gripped tight in her hands. She reached the electrical conduits unseen. Using the pipe as a lever, she pried open the heavy cover of the main junction box. Inside was a Medusa's head of thick, high-voltage cables. Rain sizzled where it touched the exposed connections. She could hear Arthur still talking, his voice rising, drawing Silas closer. She had to time this perfectly. She shoved the steel pipe into the junction box, slamming it against the main bus bars. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. A massive shower of blue and white sparks erupted from the box with a sound like lightning. The entire rooftop plunged into darkness as all the lights and humming HVAC units short-circuited. For 1/2 second, the rooftop was illuminated by a searing actinic flash. In that flash, Silas was momentarily blinded. In that darkness, Kate moved, sprinted across the gravel, silent and swift. Silas, disoriented, spun, firing a wild shot into the blackness. He didn't see her coming until it was too late. She didn't target his gun hand. She slammed the end of the steel pipe she still wielded hard into his knee. The joint buckled with a sickening crunch. Silas screamed, a cry of pure agony, and fell to the rooftop. His pistol skittered away in the darkness. Kate was on him in an instant, the butcher knife now in her hand. She pressed the cold, flat side of the blade against his throat. "It's over, Thorne," she whispered, her breath misting in the cold air. The rooftop was silent, except for Silas's gasps of pain and the soft drumming of rain. From below, the first faint sound of distant sirens began to cut through the night. The play hadn't been in the kitchen after all. It had been here, in the darkness of the rooftop, a desperate game of light and shadow, and it had worked. The wail of sirens grew from a distant cry to an imminent shriek converging on their location from all sides. The rooftop confrontation was over, but the story wasn't. The building was about to be swarmed by the NYPD. "We need to go," Arthur said, his voice shaky but urgent. "The police will be here any minute." Kate did not take her eyes, or the knife, off Silas Thorne, who writhed on the wet gravel, clutching his shattered knee. "He still has one man downstairs," she said, "and Frank Miller is out there somewhere. If we go down the front, we're walking into an unknown situation. The fire escape is our best bet." She held Silas immobilized with one hand, using the other to quickly frisk him, pulling a set of plastic zip ties from one of his tactical pockets. With brutal efficiency, she bound his hands behind his back. "Don't move," she commanded before turning to Arthur. "Let's go." They found the fire escape on the opposite side of the building, a rusty skeletal structure attached to the brick. It overlooked the same dark alley where Kate had first spotted one of the lookouts. As they descended, the sounds of the city grew louder, a chaotic mix of sirens, shouts, and car horns. The alley below was dark, strewn with overflowing dumpsters and the stench of garbage. They reached the last ladder, dropping the final 10 feet into the narrow enclosed space. It felt like landing in another world, a forgotten corner of the city, far removed from the luxury of the Golden Cage. And it was there they discovered they were not alone. Leaning against the opposite wall, shrouded in shadows, was the fifth man, the one who had locked them in the kitchen. He had his weapon raised, pointing directly at them. It wasn't Silas's man, it was Frank Miller. Arthur froze. "Frank?" he breathed, a look of profound pain on his face. "Why?" Frank Miller stepped forward, his heavy features illuminated by a faint security light. There was no remorse in his eyes, just a tired bitterness. "Why? You ask me why, Arthur. For 12 years, I've taken a bullet for you, figuratively speaking. I've handled your threats, I've swept your messes under the rug, I've stood by while you bought and sold the lives of men like Walter Thorne. And for what? To be passed over, to be treated like the hired help. Thorne's son offered me respect and a percentage that makes your pension plan look like a joke." "I trusted you, Frank," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "That was your mistake," Miller snarled. "You trust money, not people." He gestured with his pistol. "It's over. Silas may have failed, but I won't. We're leaving." Kate slowly moved in front of Arthur, shielding him with her body. She had dropped the pipe on the roof, and the butcher knife felt desperately outmatched by a firearm. At this distance, she was analyzing angles, distances, looking for any advantage. The alley was a perfect kill zone. Narrow, no cover, no escape. "You won't get away," Kate said, her voice a low, steady challenge. The police are everywhere. They're all out front, Miller sneered. By the time they figure out we're back here, we'll be long gone. Now step aside, ma'am. This doesn't concern you. I'm afraid it does, she replied. It was then that Arthur Bance did something that surprised everyone. He stepped out from behind Kate, facing his treacherous head of security, his fear replaced by a cold, quiet fury he usually reserved for the boardroom. So this is it, Frank. This is what your 12 years of service amount to, treachery and murder in a filthy alley. Arthur began to slowly walk forward. Stay back, Miller warned, his aim wavering slightly. He hadn't expected this defiance. You talk about respect, Arthur continued, his voice ringing with power. Do you think this is respect? Siding with a failed man's desperate son? Walter Thorne was a fool who couldn't see the future. He clung to the past and it drowned him. His son is no different. He's driven by emotion. And you, Frank, you threw everything away for them. Arthur was only a few feet from him now. It was a colossal gamble, a high-stakes negotiation where the currency was his own life. He was using the only weapons he had left, words and an indomitable will. Kate saw her chance. Miller's attention was completely fixed on Arthur. He was mesmerized by this unexpected final confrontation with the man he once protected and now despised. His focus had narrowed, his peripheral vision was gone. As Arthur spoke his final words, Kate moved. She lunged sideways, grabbing the lid of a metal dumpster. It was heavy, unwieldy, but she used her momentum, swinging it like a shield. Miller, startled by the sudden movement, fired. The shot ricocheted off the brick wall with a screech. Before he could fire again, Kate was on him. She brought the heavy dumpster lid down on his arm, slamming it against the wall. The sound of bone breaking was sickeningly loud. Miller screamed, his weapon clattering from his shattered hand. Kate didn't stop, driving her shoulder into his chest, slamming him into the wall. He slumped to the ground, moaning in agony, his betrayal ending not in a blaze of glory, but in a pathetic, painful heap. The alley fell silent. Arthur was panting, the adrenaline leaving him weak. Kate stood over Miller, the chef's knife she had retrieved still in her hand. The back door of the restaurant burst open, and two uniformed NYPD officers with drawn weapons stormed into the alley. NYPD, drop your weapons, hands in the air. Kate let the knife and butcher knife clatter to the ground. She raised her hands. Arthur Bance, looking from the collapsed form of Frank Miller to the resolute figure of the waitress who had saved him, slowly raised his also. The reckoning was over. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, crackling radios, and the methodical chaos of a major crime scene. The alley and restaurant were cordoned off, swarming with police officers, detectives, and paramedics. Arthur was immediately surrounded, wrapped in a blanket, and questioned by a stern-faced detective named Corrigan. He recounted events, his voice still hoarse, but the narrative was clear. His waitress, a woman named Catherine Novak, had saved his life. Kate sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic tending to a deep cut on her forearm where a glass shard had sliced her. She answered the detective's questions with quiet, concise precision, giving him just enough details about the attackers, but omitting the parts of her story that were buried too deep to share. She was just a waitress, she insisted, who got lucky, but Corrigan, a veteran of the force, looked at her with knowing eyes. He had seen civilians in crisis. They didn't move like she moved. They didn't fight like she fought. But he didn't press. Silas Thorne and his team, including the disgraced Frank Miller, were taken into custody. The story was already taking shape for the media. A high-stakes, foiled kidnapping of a prominent billionaire. An inside job. It would be the top story on every news channel by morning. After giving his statement, Arthur walked over to Kate. The paramedics had finished bandaging her arm. He stood before her, stripped of his usual arrogance, his expensive suit now little more than a collection of rags. The invincible titan of industry looked tired, vulnerable, and profoundly human. They told me your name is Catherine, he began, his voice soft. I don't know what to say. Thank you feels insufficient. Kate merely nodded, looking at the flashing lights reflected in a puddle on the ground. I want to offer you a job, Arthur said, cutting straight to the chase, reverting to the only language he truly understood, transactions. Head of my personal security, name your price. Double what I paid Frank, triple. It doesn't matter. I need you. Kate finally looked at him. For a moment, she considered it. The money would change her life. The position would offer a challenge, but she could already feel the phantom weight of tactical gear, the bitter ash taste of that life. She saw the ghosts of Beirut waiting for her in the back of an armored car. No, she said, the simple final word. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Bance, but that's not my life. I already chose to leave it behind. Arthur looked nonplussed. Then a look of understanding dawned on his face. He had tried to buy her, as he bought everything else. And for the second time that night, she had surprised him. "I understand," he said, after a long pause. "But my offer still stands in any capacity. Anything you need, anything is yours." He pulled out a sleek black business card. It was metal. "This is my private number. No assistants, no secretaries. It rings directly to me." Kate took the card. Its weight was substantial in her hand. "There is one thing," she said. "Anything." "The kitchen staff on Jiasao," she said, her gaze drifting back towards the restaurant. "They were terrified. They barely make enough to live in this city. I'm sure the restaurant will be closed for weeks for repairs. Make sure they're taken care of. Full pay plus a bonus for the trauma." Arthur stared at her. Of all the things she could have asked for, a fortune, a new life, a favor of immense power, she had asked for security for a dozen people whose names she probably didn't even know. It was a gesture of such profound and unexpected decency that it left him speechless. He finally found his voice. "Consider it done. They'll be treated like heroes." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps not head of security, but maybe a consultant, on your terms, to help me restructure my organization, to identify other vulnerabilities, other Franks." Kate considered it. It wasn't frontline. It was strategy, analysis. It was using her skills without having to carry a weapon. It was a way to integrate her past into her present, not as a ghost to be feared, but as a tool to be used. "I'll think about it, Mr. Bance," she said, a small, genuine smile finally touching her lips. In the weeks that followed, the story of the billionaire and the waitress became a minor legend in the city. The media portrayed Kate as an ordinary woman who rose to an extraordinary occasion. Arthur Bance, to the financial world's surprise, settled the acquisition of Talred Industries on far more generous terms for the employees than anyone expected. He even created a foundation in Walter Thorne's name for ethical business practices. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. Kate Novak did not return to the Golden Cage. She took Arthur's consulting job, working remotely on her own schedule. She used the money to buy a quiet little apartment away from the city's din. Sometimes she would sit by her window, holding Arthur's metal card, a tangible reminder of the night two very different lives collided. She hadn't sought violence, but by facing it, she had finally quieted the echoes of her past. She was no longer just a waitress hiding from who she was. She was Catherine Novak, and she was finally peacefully in control. That single night in the Golden Cage changed everything, not just for the billionaire whose life was saved, but for the woman who refused to be a victim of her own past. It's a powerful reminder that heroes aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they're the people we overlook every day, individuals with hidden strengths and untold stories forged in fires we can only imagine. Kate's journey shows us that your past doesn't have to be a prison. It can be the arsenal you use to build a better future. What skills, what hidden strengths do you carry within you? If this story of unexpected bravery and dramatic twists captivated you, please let us know by liking. Share it with someone who loves a story where the underdog triumphs. And most importantly, subscribe to Stories of Black Women for more real-life dramas and incredible stories you won't want to miss. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.